The Most Disturbing Toys Ever Made Part 2. The Face Bank was created by a Japanese company and is an anthropomorphic coin-eating bank that eats coins. The battery-powered robotic bank comes in two supremely creepy versions, the full face and the just nose and mouth version. If you wave your money in front of its face, its stomach grumbles and you feed it and it ends with a loud burp. Would you like a nightmare? Well, the Jolly Chimp, also known as the cymbal-banging monkey, was a toy from the 1950s and 70s, created by a Japanese company, Dashin CK. Upon activating it, this thing goes nuts, banging its cymbals together repeatedly, while bobbing its head, grinning, and chattering its teeth. You may also recognize this toy from 2010's Toy Story 3, where it played a security guard of sorts. Today, the Jolly Chimp is highly sought after as a collectible. I'm not sure why anyone would want a bulging-eyed, red, psychotic monkey, but hey, to each their own.
This is the first really scary movie I watched when I started reviewing horror movies on here. One of my followers recommended it to me, and it's a movie that creeped me out an awful lot, and one that I suggest to people all the time. I recently revisited it, so I'm going to review it again for everybody who didn't follow me at the time. My name's Ricky, I love horror movies, and this is Sator. So this movie is what people would probably consider a folk horror. It was released back in 2019 and was directed by Jordan Graham, and it's about a supernatural entity that is plaguing this entire family. So this is quite a low budget horror movie, but you really don't feel like you're watching a low budget horror movie. The cinematography, set design and costume design in this film is stunning. The acting is great throughout, and I really love the story. It also happens to be a movie that really creeped me out when I first watched it, and upon watching it again, I got that same level of creep. There are some very well placed jump scares in this movie, so if that's your thing, it has that too. But what I love the most about this film is what this film is meant to represent. When I started out on my TikTok journey, I wanted to talk about horror films on a bit of a deeper level. I wanted to see what these horror films were trying to represent. And I've always been drawn to horror movies that mean something else than here's a jump scare or there's a spooky guy trying to chase you down a hallway. And that's why I fell in love with this film, because this film is about hereditary mental health and us trying to escape a fate that we know might be ours. And it asks us this question: are certain things genetically escapable? The entity in this movie represents that fear, that inevitable feeling that something is creeping up on us. It's about realizing that things are starting to go wrong and trying to either deny it or escape it. That to me is horrifying. It may not be the jumpiest film in the world, and it's slow, but slow in a good way. But its themes, its ideas are what scares me the most with this film. It's atmospheric as hell, it looks great, it's creepy, you should love it.
A 47-year-old teacher has been arrested for giving lap dances to children. Louisa Melchoin is a school guidance counsellor from Connecticut. She was working at Nathan Hale Middle School and was teaching children as young as 7th grade. Now, the teacher is actually married with children of her own. She had been working as a teacher for over 20 years. An anonymous tip came into the police in April, stating that somebody had found inappropriate messages on Louisa's phone to one of the students. Screenshots were provided to police and they began investigating this. Explicit photos had been sent and money had been exchanged between the pair. She is currently accused of giving a lap dance to a child and other S activities. The child has been interviewed by police and stated that the teacher would invite him into her office and she would undertake the dances and other illegal acts. She would apparently groom him by sending him money for taxis and food. She has resigned from her job and is charged with SA and risk of injury to a child.
Yes, Hannibal Lecter used a cattle prod to stimulate an unconscious man's prostate in order to milk him, and then gave the seed to this man's sister so that she could have a baby with it. But there's more. The man's name is Mason, and I told you guys last time that Mason was responsible for performing a forced abortion on his sister. Mason gets even worse. Not only has Mason essayed children, but he has also essayed Margot, his sister. But not only did Mason perform a forced abortion on his sister, he told his sister that the baby was actually still alive. He said it was somewhere on his farm, but to Margot's horror, when she went to go see the baby, it was a stillborn fetus that he had stuffed inside of a living pig's uterus that was being kept alive on his farm. This is the final nail in the coffin for Margot, and she takes one of Mason's living eels and stuffs it down his throat, and he... As if all of this isn't messy enough, you might be wondering, Bailey, why did Hannibal agree to milk Mason for Margot? Well, you see, Margot is one of Hannibal Lecter's patients, but so is Mason. He was encouraging Margot to try to unalive her brother, and to try to get pregnant so that way she could take the family fortune, but the one thing that Hannibal didn't know is that her chosen baby daddy was Hannibal's boyfriend, and Hannibal gets pissed. So he tells Mason, who was one of his other patients, that Margot got pregnant without his permission, and that's when Mason decides to attack Margot.
This was one of the world's first introductions at the time on a mass level to the world of snuff films. A while back, a group of American documentary filmmakers decided that they were going to venture into the Amazon rainforest to film a documentary about a cannibal community. There was going to be a director, scriptwriter, and 2 cameramen. They tell all of their friends about it. They'd been preparing for this trip for months now, and it's finally time. And then they just vanish in the Amazon rainforest, disappear into thin air. Professor Harold Monroe, an anthropologist from NYU, decides he's gonna run a little rescue mission to find the missing documentary makers. The plan is honestly horrendous. They're gonna infiltrate the cannibal community and try to figure out what happened and try to get the tapes back, try to find the documentary makers. He and his team end up finding out they're dead. There is a shrine that the community made where their skeletal remains are laid out, as well as their reels of film. The professor somehow is able to make a deal to leave with the reels of film, and he has no idea what's in them. He can't even play them until he gets back to New York. He goes back home, reviews this recovered footage, and it's like watching a real-life horror movie. The 4 filmmakers have a very rough start to their trip. A few days in, their guide, Felipe, is bitten by a venomous snake. There's nothing they can do about it. There's nobody around. It's too late. They're too deep into the forest to leave now and get him medical attention. Meaning either the venom is going to spread to the rest of his body, or they have to cut his leg off. So they cut his leg off with a machete in the middle of the Amazon rainforest in an effort to save his life, but he ends up dying anyway. They just leave him behind. The group make it to the location of the cannibal community, and they see one of the younger community members walking by themselves. So what do? Do they ask him to introduce them to their community because they're making a documentary? No. They shoot him in the leg so that they can easily follow him back to his community-centered area. When they do, they just wage war from the get-go, which I'm so confused by. The 4 filmmakers, yes, they want a documentary, but they mainly want good footage. So they intimidate a whole tribe, kill a pet pig, herd the community members into a tent, burn the tent down. The professor keeps watching, and it just gets worse. The 3 male filmmakers film themselves taking turns R-wording a young girl. The only one trying to convince them to stop is the female screenwriter, but she tells them to stop because she argues, you guys are wasting precious film footage. We don't have that much film. You can see in the background that they're being watched by the locals. They know what the filmmakers are doing. The filmmakers later find the girl impaled on a wooden pole, meaning a pole went through her private area and then through her mouth, and she's impaled on it. She's dead. They state in the documentary that it's because she's no longer pure. They claim the locals killed her for her loss of virginity. But it's pretty clear from the way the filmmakers are talking about it, the professor has an inkling that they R-worded her, and they killed her, and they set it up like this to get better footage. In the end, the community attacked the filmmakers for what they did to the girl. One of them, Jack, they use a large machete to cut off his private parts, and even after he's dead, they continue to mutilate his body. Faye, the screenwriter, is captured, stripped, gang essayed, beaten to death, and then ultimately beheaded. One of the other camera guys keeps trying to convince the other survivor, we have to go and try and save her, but he's not listening. He just keeps filming the assault on her from afar. Now, eventually, the last 2 two filmmakers are located, killed, all the while their cameras keep rolling, and the footage is probably some of the most graphic, intense violence you can see on a screen. There's horrific torture, essay, animal cruelty, murder, cannibalism, all caught on camera. There's scenes of mutilation, severing of private parts. Professor Monroe would say he was left pondering who the real cannibals really are. The footage premiered in Milan, Italy.
What?
Where the man who had the footage and owned it and premiered the footage was promptly arrested. The man was arrested for animal cruelty and murder. This man argued in the court, "Please, you have to believe me. None of that is real. I'm a movie director. All of this is fake. None of it is real. You have to trust me. Look me up."
Honestly, we should start doing this for any man who R-words and impregnates a child. This is 54-year-old Glenn Sullivan Sr. In July of 2022, a victim came forward to police saying that Glenn Sullivan had R-worded her multiple times when she was just 14 years old. Detectives learned that Sullivan not only groomed the victim, but also threatened her and her family with violence in order to keep her silent. After one of those attacks, the victim learned that she was pregnant, and a DNA test confirmed it was Sullivan's. This child could not terminate the pregnancy even if she wanted to, because the state has had laws to prevent that for years, even before Roe v. Wade was overturned. On April 17th of this year, Glenn Sullivan was finally sentenced. Prosecutors asked for 50 years and that he be chemically castrated. But Sullivan wrote to the court and said, "You know what, I voluntarily give consent to be surgically castrated." So now they can physically remove his balls. So if Sullivan lives to be more than 100 years old, he'll have to get his nuts chopped off too. But maybe some other inmates will catch wind of what Sullivan did and speed up that process.
What happened to Gabby Hanna? Throughout the 2010s, Gabby Hanna was known to be one of the most controversial YouTubers on the platform. Despite being always caught up in drama, she maintained a rabid and passionate fanbase. But it was really just in the last few years that things really began to look odd. A few years back, Gabby Hanna completely changed her content and began to do music. With this change, we saw much less of her online, which led to an overall decline in the amount of publicity she got. Then she began to post a video series of all the problems she's had with other content creators, which led to other big names bringing out receipts and calling her out. After this, things began to die down and we didn't hear from her for a while. And then in late 2022, things got weird. Over the course of just a few days, she posted over 100 TikToks, screaming, talking about religious views, babbling what seemed to be nonsense to the average viewer, and overall just seeming not herself. Things turned really creepy when she invited a total stranger into her videos. Like and follow for part 2.
This terrifying woman killed her boyfriend and then tried to feed him to his own children. I promise you that your jaw is going to be on the floor the entire time during this case. Catherine Knight came from a very, very small farming town in Australia where the primary job source was a slaughterhouse. That is going to be very important later on. Her home life was really, really toxic and violent. Catherine actually claims that her father would essay her mother in front of her up to 10 times per day. Catherine was a very complex and aggressive child. Literally, her own friends were terrified of her. Catherine dropped out of school when she was 15 with dreams of working at the slaughterhouse, where they would unalive 600 animals per day. And Catherine really, really enjoyed this in like a super creepy way. Even her co-workers were like side-eyeing this trick. Catherine would go out of her way to hit animals that would run in front of her car. This woman is seriously messed up and capable of unimaginable violence. Around this time, Catherine met her first husband, David Collette. This would be her first of extremely violent relationships. Catherine was so violent and manipulative and abusive. She was a really, really tall, fiery redhead and would go after men that were smaller than her so she could physically dominate them. Catherine and David's marriage was literally just full of insults and injuries for David, and Catherine attempted to unalive him multiple times during their marriage. The first time was literally on their wedding night. They had just gotten married consummated the marriage, and then he woke up to his new bride choking him. And then another time was 6 weeks after their first daughter, Melissa, was born, when she came after him with like a broken piece of a glass bottle. David did finally try to leave Catherine. She took their 2-month-old baby daughter, Melissa, to the train tracks and just left her on the tracks as a train was approaching. Luckily, there was a man nearby that like swiftly went and got Melissa off the train tracks with literally seconds to spare before the train would have gone over her. And for doing this, Catherine only spent 1 day in a hospital and then was released with Melissa back in her custody immediately. And David took her back. They were on and off for another 8 years and even had another baby. Catherine would be extremely abusive to the kids and David. She literally fractured his skull once, and David stayed with her, never pressed charges against her. It was actually Catherine that officially ended things with David, and then Catherine would jump from relationship to relationship, each one being more violent and dark and twisted as the last one. One of these relationships, Catherine unalived her boyfriend's 8-week-old puppy. Catherine would do all this stuff to these men and they would just stay and they would never press charges against her. And it was usually Catherine that would end the relationships at the end of them, except for one man who literally was so afraid of Catherine that he ran away. Literally disappeared to get away from her. When Catherine was 38 years old, she began dating this gentleman named John Pricey. John is described as extremely hardworking. He had plenty of friends. He was really funny and sweet and very, very devoted to the children that he had with his ex-wife. Of course, this relationship with John was just as violent and abusive as all the other ones that Catherine had had in the past. She would often beat or even stab John if she didn't get her way. John was terrified of what Catherine would do next. His friends and family were begging him to leave her, but for some reason he didn't. After one really, really extreme attack, John attempted to press charges against Catherine. This was the first time somehow that any of these men actually tried to press charges against Catherine, but they told him that it would be about 3 weeks until he got his day in court and something could actually be done against Catherine. But John had a feeling that by that time he would probably be gone already. He was terrified of what Catherine was going to do to him next. Exact same day, John told his coworkers if he did not show up for work the following day, that meant that Catherine had killed him. And tragically, it was that same night that Catherine brutally unalived John. I actually can't even tell you all of the details on what she did to him. It's that disturbing. She used her skills that she learned at the slaughterhouse to treat his body like she would have a cattle at the slaughterhouse, if you know anything about that. And then Catherine began to cook him to serve for dinner to John's own children the following night. Next morning, when John didn't show up for work, his coworkers told the police of his chilling premonition, and that's when the police went to his house and discovered the terrifying, gruesome scene. I cannot even tell you all the details of what the police saw when they got there, and trust me, you wouldn't even want to know them, but I will say that it's unlike anything I bet 99.99999% of police officers have ever had to see at a crime scene. The officers that arrived at the crime scene needed counseling for a very long time afterwards. Some of them needed to take months off of work, and some of them could not eat meat for a very long time. Amongst the terrifying, gruesome, brutal scene was the kitchen table that was set for dinner, this really disturbing, disgusting dinner that Catherine had prepared, and there was a plate ready for each of John's children that would be coming over that exact day. John's head was still in a pot that was on the stove. And Catherine was just sleeping in the bedroom without a care in the world of this terrifying, gruesome, brutal scene that was just outside the bedroom door. Catherine Knight is the first woman in Australian history to be sentenced to life in prison. The judge marked her file never to be released. Good, because she is really, really scary. To this day, Catherine has never given a motive for what she did to John or even shown any remorse. She is just pure evil. Let me know what case you'd want to see me cover next, and I love you guys so much. I'll see you tomorrow.
This is all the news you're not going to see on TV today, but it's going to be simplified in 60 seconds. A new study has now revealed that 2 nights of bad sleep can actually make you feel 4 years older than you actually are. So that's cool. If you haven't heard about this yet, there are literal bullet vending machines that are being installed in US grocery stores to increase the accessibility of ammunition. Okay. So basically, these vending machines are made by a company called American Rounds, and they're saying that these kiosks function like ATMs and they're available 24/7. Whoa. This new bridge in China is so massive that it broke 10 world records at the same time. By the way, here's a better picture of how cool this thing is. I would never drive on this, but okay. And then for anybody that's interested, here are the list of the 10 world records that this thing broke. This is crazy. Chinese police are now starting to re-park illegally parked cars instead of towing them, so that's cool. Basically, they take this little device that's in the photo and it rolls under your car, picks it up, and then moves it. There's going to be a double meteor shower that's happening on July the 30th for anybody that hasn't heard about this yet. If you want to make sure you don't miss it, just make sure you add me because I will give you another reminder, but we're also going to be live streaming the entire thing with our telescopes on TikTok, so make sure you come to that. I give you these news roundups every day, so make sure you add me and come back to me tomorrow.
Oh my god, we got Divine Departure finally here. Okay, let's see this. Oh man, that animation's clean. Yo, Shang's ain't gonna let this happen. He just saw his future. He knows what's coming if he lets it happen. Bro, is that like a hockey bird? What the hell is that? Oh my gosh! Dude! Oh, god damn! Bro just cracked it! The impact frames. Bro. Peak. Oh my gosh, the sound effects. Dude, peak. Perfection. Holy. Probably the best animation this year. That's crazy. Just like that.
This is part 2 of the Burning Sun case. In 2019, reporter King is sitting there when her phone rings. Hello? There's a soft voice on the other end. Hello? Reporter King? This is Kuhara. A K-pop idol reaching out to a reporter is unheard of. And for what? To help. Kuhara said she wants to help. Hara tells reporter Kang that she read the articles recently released about Seungri, JJY, and Choi. She knew them. They were all friends at one point and they used to come over to her house and hang out. And she didn't realize at that point, but she does remember now seeing some things on their phone and it just was weird. I do think something is going on. I think you're right about it. But reporter Kang trusts her and she says, to be honest, Hara, I am not getting anywhere with this case. No one's taking my calls. Hara is quiet and says, well, I want to help. I don't know how much of a help I can be, but I want to help. There is something Hara can do for reporter King. She needs a name, the name of the police official. It's never mentioned in the messages. Clearly, reporter King can't ask the police. She can't ask sources without tipping these involved off. She tells Hara, in the Kakao messages, they keep referring to a police contact that makes their problems magically go away. Someone they call the police prosecutor general. He helped with drunk driving charges and other fines, just making them vanish. Can you get me the name of the police official? Hara is rather friendly with most of the idols involved, and she was actually pretty good friends with Choi from FT Island, who is also involved in the chat rooms. It's a lot to deal with, but she tells reporter Kang she's gonna get Choi on the phone and they can record it. Hara manages to get Choi on the phone and tells him she doesn't lie to him, she doesn't secretly record him, she convinces him to tell journalist Kang what he knows about the police official. She tells him, I can help you, tell the reporter everything you know. Reporter Kang speaks. It appears he's someone very high up, Choi says, yeah, we actually met once and played a round of golf together. I heard he's currently at the presidential residence working for the president. He did work for the police. It's a police officer named Yoo Kyung-gyun. Reporter Kang was able to record the conversation, and this was the big break in the case. Kuhara will help reporters blow the lid off of the Burning Sun case. And less than a year later, after that, she will be found dead in her apartment.
This movie came out 11 years ago. It's not talked about enough. It's severely underrated, and it absolutely slaps. I'm Ian Van Gogh. I'm your horror movie hype man. Hit that follow button, and today we're talking about Under the Skin. A mysterious young woman seduces lonely men in the evening hours in Scotland. So I saw this movie when it first came out, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I knew one thing. I love Scarlett Johansson. Now watching it again, I'm certain of it. It's so damn good. The atmosphere, the cinematography, the score, the story, everything is amazing. And the fact that most of the dudes in this movie aren't even actors is absolutely wild. This whole movie is very unique and I absolutely love it. It's slow but entertaining, has some creepy and unsettling moments, and the whole movie is just so different from anything else I've ever seen. If you want to check it out for yourself, it's streaming on HBO Max right now. If you've seen Under the Skin, then let me know what you think of it in the comments. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
The case of the Menendez brothers is one of the most controversial true crime cases to this day. These two young men did kill their parents, but whether or not they're victims or cold-blooded killers has been highly debated for decades. The Menendez family appeared to be picture perfect. They were extremely well off financially and lived in this big, beautiful mansion in Beverly Hills. The father, Jose, was an extremely successful CEO. His wife, Kitty, was seen as a devoted wife and mother. And their two sons, Lyle and Eric, were, handsome, charismatic, all-American boys and exceptional tennis players. But the perfect family that they showed to the rest of the world was an absolute lie. The father, Jose, was pretty much hated by everyone he knew, and he was having multiple affairs. The mother, Kitty, was deeply unhappy. She was a heavy drinker and also using substances. And the boys, Lyle and Eric, had an unspeakable amount of pressure put on them to be perfect and appear perfect. The older brother, Lyle, was actually going bald at 14 and wetting the bed at 14, so it just shows the amount of stress that he was clearly under. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Lyle and Eric were definitely seen as rich, spoiled brats, and maybe they were. Their father, Jose, was actually considering of cutting them out of his will at the time that our case really takes place. The facade that the Menendez family put on to the outside world that they were this perfect family all came crashing down on August 20th, 1989, when Lyle was 21 years old and Eric was 18 years old, and both of them burst into their home one night and opened fire on their parents. It was a brutal scene. Kitty was shot 10 times and Jose was shot 6 times by their own children. And then about an hour and 45 minutes later, after the two boys felt like they put together an alibi, Lyle called 911.
What's the problem? Someone killed my parents. Pardon? Someone killed my parents. What? Who was the person that was shot? My mom and my dad. Your mom and dad? Okay, hold on a second.
When the police showed up to the scene, both the brothers were hysterical and inconsolable, and the police definitely believed their story that they just came home and found their parents dead in their house. So the police actually didn't test either of the brothers' hands for GSR. It actually seemed like the boys were going to get away with it, and they were set financially. They were actually set to inherit about $20 million from their inheritance and also their father's life insurance policy, which is actually over $50 million in today's money. And the boys quickly started spending their parents' money like crazy. If it was nice and the boys wanted it, they were buying it. They were buying nice cars, nice shoes, nice Rolex watches. They bought 2 conjoining condos that were really, really nice, and they would throw these really wild parties. The brothers were only ever actually caught because one day Eric just broke down, whether it was from the stress or the guilt or a little bit of both, but he confessed to his therapist, Dr. Oziel. Not gonna lie, Dr. Oziel is kind of seen as a sketchy therapist, not that great of a dude, and instead of turning in Eric and Lyle, he actually secretly recorded them and it's actually believed that he was going to use those secret recordings of their confession to blackmail them for some of all that money that they inherited. But Dr. Oziel actually had a mistress that knew about all of this. Definitely some weird pillow talk, but she turned in Eric and Lyle for the murder of their parents. The boys were both arrested and set to go to trial, and that's when it first came out that Lyle and Eric killed their parents not for financial gain, but in self-defense after a lifetime of abuse at the hands of both their father and their mother. They do claim that both of their parents abused them, but that most of the really traumatic abuse came from their father, Jose, but that their mother, Kitty, knew about it and just didn't do anything, while their father psychologically abused them, physically abused them, and SA'd them for years. During their trial, both of the brothers took the stand and testified in gruesome, horrifying detail of the SA that they endured at the hands of their own father. And a lot of it is available online and on YouTube if you guys want to watch it. I will just say it is really, really hard and heartbreaking to see because they do go, like I said, in really horrifying detail.
And how did it start?
It just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me. I just told him that I didn't want to do this and that it hurt me.
The trial was even broadcasted live in its entirety. It was a media frenzy, a public circus. Literally everyone was talking about it. Everyone had an opinion. And honestly, the public had really little sympathy for the two boys. They were definitely not widely believed either. At this point in the early 90s, boys and men being SA'd wasn't really something that we talked about. And they were mocked. Really, they were mocked. They were even mocked in a really famous skit that they did on SNL. But most of the people that actually knew the Menendez family and Eric and Lyle supported Eric and Lyle. Actually, 51 people testified about how cruel their father, Jose, was, and that many of them knew that they were being physically abused, and some of them even testified that they knew that the boys were being SA'd for years. Ultimately, the jury was actually split, deadlocked. They were actually split by gender, which does not surprise me at all. All of the women jurors wanted to acquit the boys, while all of the men jurors wanted them to be found guilty. So they had to have a second trial, and this time the judge said that he didn't really want the boys to talk about their SA as much. So this time the boys were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This is extremely controversial and highly debated to this day, and a lot of people don't really think that they got a fair trial. There are a lot of people that to this day believe that the boys were lying about the abuse and it was just a defense strategy and that the boys really killed their parents because they wanted all of their money. While there's other people that truly believe that the boys were being abused, that they were deeply traumatized after decades of terrible abuse and were truly terrified of their parents. There's also a few people that kind of go in the middle, that they believe that the boys were being abused, but that the primary motive was that they wanted the parents' money. Please, please, please tell me what you guys all think. I'm definitely interested to read all of your guys' point of views, your thoughts, and your opinions in the comments. Personally, when I first heard about this case years ago and I researched it, I was really on the fence with what I believed. It actually wasn't until I went on YouTube and went online and actually listened to Eric and Lyle testify in such detail about the abuse and about them being SA'd that I really, really don't think they're lying at all. If you're on the fence or you do think they're lying, I would definitely watch those clips before you truly 100% make up your mind. The brothers were actually denied to be in the same prison for 22 years, and it was really, really hard on both of them because they were so close, but they were reunited in the same prison in 2018. Very, very recently, some new updates and some new evidence has come out that might actually prove that Lyle and Eric have been telling the truth the entire time. Very recently, one of Eric and Lyle's cousins was going through her storage and actually found a letter that Eric sent her family 8 months before his parents died that documented the abuse and also how terrified he was of his father. Also, another man has recently come out that said that Jose was also SAing him when he was 14 and 15 years old. There are many people that are hopeful that these new updates and new evidence could actually change Lyle and Eric's conviction from first degree to manslaughter, so they could be released actually on time served. This was all really coming out in the public back in March, so only a couple months ago, but I haven't really seen anything else since, but I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. Until then, definitely let me know all your thoughts about the Menendez brothers and just keep discussing with me in the comments. I'll be in there replying to as many of you guys as I can. And I love you guys. Let me know what case you'd want to see me cover next, and I'll see you tomorrow.